Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. I am just delighted to be able to introduce Mark Dancer. He's here for a presentation on a new framework for innovating B2B. Mark founded the Network for Business Innovation, N4BI, to drive awareness, advocacy, and excellence around the theory and practice of B2B innovations. N4BI operates as an innovation flywheel and helps drive progress through research, writing, engagement, and partnerships. Mark's newsletter on innovating B2B explores the future of our society, economy, and technology to identify innovation opportunities. Every edition is an incubator of ideas for next generation thinkers about the future of distribution. As a fellow for the NAW Institute for the Distribution Excellence, Mark helps B2B innovators build foresight to become market leaders in the digital age. Mark has authored 5 books and numerous papers on digital transformation and business model innovation, most recently, Distribution Leads In. All of his work draws on 30 years of experience working with B2B companies to achieve go-to-market excellence in emerging and developed markets. Today, distribution, disintermediation, digital transformation, social responsibility, and human-first innovations enable a B2B revolution. Mark's work is a call to action for every company in the B2B ecosystem to join in to lead our society and economy to the future. I'm just so excited to have this presentation, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So I hope you'll all welcome Mark Dancer.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynn, for that very introduction. So sorry. And thank you, Lynn and Rand, for having me today. I'm excited about being here too. You know, what I would say is just for a little more context, I was a channel strategist and did some Salesforce design work for about 30 years as a consultant, almost entirely B2B. When it was B2C, you know, I was focused on the trade aspect, the relationships with the channel partners. And over that time, I don't know how many projects I did, but there were hundreds or thousands of projects. And at the time, the ones that interested me really, and I really liked, were the ones where the client, the company I was working with, was, you know, interested in considering some radically different approaches to their channel marketing and channel strategy before they settled in on what they actually did. And those type of engagements were few and far between. What I found is, you know, as I've been a channel strategist for 20 or 30 years, and I've been a fellow with NAW for about 6 years, I think. As I've been talking to distributors and manufacturers and other B2B companies about things like digital transformation, there's a growing sense that, you know, it's not about just applying digital tools to, you know, upgrade the way you go to market. The digital tools themselves and the things that they're capable of doing, combined with some other forces for change in our world, are causing leading edge companies to think about whether they are going to change their business model. So whether you're a distributor or a manufacturer, as you get really good at digital things, and as you participate in global and local economies in new ways, and as you embrace changes to our society, which are things like future of work, future of learning, and how we deal with communities today and other things, there's a chance that, or a thought that, you know, we can do things differently in our business models, either radically differently or a little bit differently. That fascinates me. So I am, you know, essentially thinking about the frameworks I used for all those years, which are things like coverage, compensation of your sales force, or your indirect channel partners, how you talk to customers to gain insights for your channel strategies, your go-to-market strategies, how you think about creating partnership arrangements. All those things are changing, and I don't know what the answer is yet, but I'm going to share today what I've noticed and where I'm looking for new frameworks for B2B innovation. Please feel free to ask questions if you like along the way. If you put them in the chat box, either I'll notice, or Lynn, Lori, or Rand will notice and kind of call them out to me. I'll save some time at the end, but I often don't, despite my best plans. So if you have questions, please share them as we go. And others, please help me notice them. This is our agenda for today. I'm going to kind of define what I think B2B is and what innovating B2B is about. I'm going to share some research I did for NAW back in January and February about, I think of it as what distributors are learning about distribution during the pandemic. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about best practices versus leaps, right? Best practices are about implementing what others have done and getting good at it. Leaps are about leading. And then overall, I'm going to just talk a little bit about, I have a very future-oriented discussion, and my work is very future-oriented. And I'm just going to kind of explain my approach to that, which I think of as finding the future in the present. This is my framework for how I run my work. I'm a solopreneur today. I'll come back to that at the end as I walk around this. So, I look for ideas. I do that by listening to podcasts, reading books, looking for articles, networking, finding thought leaders, finding companies that are doing creative things. I find new ideas. They're kind of all future of whatever, work, life, technology, economy, globalism. They're often not about business and usually not about B2B or almost never about distribution. So I write up those what I find and how it might apply to B2B and ask some questions in my weekly newsletter, which is Mark Dancer on Innovating B2B. I've grown a network over the years through my consulting work, my work as a fellow. I'm looking for people that can be or are curious about being a next generation thinker about the future of B2B and distribution. I've started writing my next book. So as I publish every week, I'm working towards tying it all together in a book, which I call The Heart, Soul, the working title anyway, is The Heart, Soul, and Future of Distribution. And then my partners, that's how I scale. So my NAW fellowship is one. I work with a new organization in Colorado where I live called the Colorado University's Innovation Council, which is trying to bring innovation experiences and learning opportunities to students as they work directly with corporations, companies. And then I have some others too. So that's kind of my framework. And I'm sharing that with you just so it might give some context for what I talk about today. Love this quote by Peter Thiel. We wanted flying cars and instead we got 140 characters, which is a reference, of course, to Twitter, and I'm old, I'll say that. I can remember, the things I remember most from my youth when I was around 10 years old or so is sitting in front of our TV, watching the moonshots and the moon landings, right? And I watched Star Trek and I watched the Jetsons and I wanted those damn flying cars. I thought we might get to them in my life. And then you've all heard this, but now we have, you can't really see it because I'm blurred, but we have our smartphones now. And it's often said that the computing power in your smartphone is what just dwarfs the computing power we had to send those men, and they were men at the time, those astronauts to the moon. And I think about that, and my first observations are, beside the fact that I wanted flying cars by now, is that back then we didn't talk about the technology of what it took to get those astronauts to the moon. We talk about how they were putting their lives on the line, about how trained they were, how supermen, they were almost supermen in terms of their knowledge and their physical skills. And there was, drama and tension and excitement and reward, and it drew us together as a community. I was listening to a podcast on history the other day, and it said that basically they were talking about, over time, eons, and they said basically all leap forwards come from cooperation, right? And today we have, social media, and don't get me wrong, digital transformation is making a huge impact in the efficiencies of how companies run and the quality of customer experiences. But I just don't get the same thing out of it that I got out of watching those moonshots, and I want more. And I think that's what Peter Thiel is calling for too. And I think the way to get more is for B2B people, all right, the people that are in our organization. I'm talking about getting more out of business, right? Out of B2B, is for us to get involved, right? There's disruption from the outside. There's digital transformation. I've read an article. I can't remember the gentleman's name. I would say it if I can remember. He has an article on Medium. He says, we really don't have to live our lives and do our work like the technology overlords tell us to, right? I think businesses can take charge of the future. And because we're business people focused on creating value for customers, right? That's our mission as business people. I think we can aim for those moonshots and those moon landings. So this page just kind of sets a little bit of a groundwork from foundation for how I think about the things. On the left is a screen grab of Amazon Business, right? And I'm going to pick them apart a little bit here, and I'm going to say Amazon Business, big whoop. But before I say that, the Amazon and Amazon Business, is obviously a powerhouse. They've grown tremendously. They have a huge economies of sophistication and scale around warehousing and delivery and artificial intelligence and robots, and they've grown amazingly quickly. But when I look at them, I think, well, when I first started learning about distributors, and I was talking to, say, a plant manager or a facilities manager or a contractor, and I would ask them how they buy, they would say, well, what do you mean? What type of purchase? And I said, well, let's just say you want to get something, quickly, you need something fast. And they would say almost literally, well, if I kind of know what I want and it's a one-off purchase, I'm going to buy one or two of them. I don't buy them that often, or maybe I do, but this is kind of an extra situation. And, I know who the brands are and who the products are pretty much, and I want to check price. Well, I pull down, and I can remember one guy showing it to me. He pulled down the Grainger catalog, the Red Book, right? That value proposition of one-off purchase, you kind of know what it is. You want to check price, check products, make sure you're not missing anything. You want to get it pretty fast. And you realize that for the privilege, well, you're probably going to pay a little bit more. You're not getting the lowest possible price. That's what Amazon offers too, I think, in their buy box arrangement. So what Amazon has done, MDM puts them now in 2019 anyway. I think that's the most, MDM is Modern Distribution Management, trade magazine that's more than a trade magazine today, very creative company. But they put them at about number 5, depending on whether they're putting them against industrial distributors, electrical distributors, and so on. And Ferguson, I think, is the biggest at somewhere around 15 billion. Grainger's around 11 billion, I think. I haven't looked at these numbers recently. Amazon Business, they put them at about 8 or 9 billion in 2019, growing really rapidly. But, distribution, the portion of distribution, which is distributor sales in the United States, is $6 trillion. I've seen plenty of malls that are empty. I've been looking for a distributor that was put out of business by Amazon, and I can't find them. Maybe they're there. Distributors have a tough time, and they're going out of business because they're being acquired, and some are just walking away from the business. But Amazon has basically taken the convenience buy by storm, right? And that's why they're a big threat to Grainger. So the other thing I want to say here is that on the left side of the slide, I take it, some of the words that Amazon has on the screen grab really bother me, like reshape your buying for your organization. Does that mean that they're going to do business with Amazon, my customers have to buy the way Amazon wants them to? Work with us. Most of the B2B companies I know, their motto is something like, I'm here to help, right? And those two, I may be wrong, but they strike me that way, that there's a certain amount of hubris or just lack of understanding of what the B2B market is like, if those are their phrases. On the right, I have, today we talk in personas and customer journeys, right? I used to talk when I was doing a ton of customer research about buying situations or buy scenarios. And these were the 8 most common, right? Convenience, price shopping, aggressive price shopping, spot buys, which is opportunistic, solution. I need a solution. I need something custom. It's a project, and projects might be in construction. We've got distributors and contractors and manufacturers and designers. You've got replenishment for MRO. You've got replenishment for OEM production. You've got emergencies, which is the fire put the flood out. My business is down and I have to get up, right? And convenience fits in the buy box. I'm not so sure about the other ones. If you let customers buy the way they want to buy, Amazon is branching out, right? They have a sales, I'm told, there's no insider knowledge here. They have a sales force. They're offering some replenishment services, some other things. But I think that's kind of good news, right? When Amazon takes a huge amount of convenience share, they're disrupting. When they put a sales force on the street, they're competing, right? And I had a distributor tell me the other day that their customer was called on by Amazon salesperson, and they said, you know, they didn't know what the hell they were talking about, right? So I think now would not advise you to take that and say, if you feel threatened by Amazon, don't be. You got a lot of money, they're very aggressive, they have all the data in the world, they're going to figure out where they win, where they can dominate. But if I think about B2B companies creating their own moonshots, I think we've got some wiggle room, and I think we've got some smartness, right? And so I'm going to read kind of my 4 key takeaway observations about B2B at the bottom of the slide. I do take exception. That's not really exception. There's a great, I do like theory and language and discipline around personas and journeys, right? But I think we need to remember that business customers don't buy like consumers, right? They have preferences, behaviors, and demands. They expect power in the relationship. I interviewed about 20 professional procurement agents of factories a couple of years ago, and they'd all told me that they'd been called on by Amazon, at least that's how I screened them. And they said they signed NDAs. They couldn't tell me what Amazon was offering to them. I said, oh, this is gonna be a short call. They said, but we'll tell you what we want. We'll tell you what we told them. And basically they said, you know, hey, I'm a professional procurement agent. I expect you to jump through hoops for me. I don't think that Amazon really liked that answer, right? I don't think it's really their model. So, you know, business customer buying behavior is intentional and it's managed through policies, programs, processes, and metrics.
Hey, Mark, when you heard this conversation, was Amazon willing to respond to an RFP with a document?
Well, they didn't want to tell me anything that Amazon had to say to them specifically because of the NDA, right?
I just can't imagine Amazon producing a document to buy something, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that, right? I think it's, you know, my bottom, Lynn, it's a great question. And my number 4 point here is that just because we have virtual options for finding out information and making purchases doesn't mean that as a business, you know, I'm speaking as a customer, that my needs have changed, right? I still run my business. And I think that in one of the other books I wrote for NAW, I have the whole first chapter is about enabling the future of business for your customers, right? Because we spend a lot of time gazing at our navels, figuring out how we should transform our own business. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to be gained in digital transformation, but one of the best paths is to sign up for helping your customers, the businesses, get to their future. You have to be pretty strong and credible to do that, and you'll learn what you can do that's new for them. I don't think Amazon's doing that, right? They have a platform, they want to load it up. Did I answer your question at all, Lynn? Thank you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. I was looking at the bottom of my screen because that's where I moved your picture for the moment. Sorry. A channel or a source cannot be all things to all customers. We talk omni-channel today, which is, in my definition, I think it's fair, is a consistent experience across all channels. Multi-channel is a different experience in every channel, right? So you have channels to perform. Some are all a subset of these 8 scenarios, and maybe others, and they can't be good at everything, right? If you do, you don't have a value proposition. You can't be everything to everybody. We know that. And I think the other thing that sets B2B aside from B2C, and I hate this, I do hate, it really makes my skin crawl, when somebody says, well, it happened in B2C, so it's going to happen in B2B. There's some truth in that, but B2B is very different in many ways. And one of the ways B2B is different is that we establish partnerships because, you know, just think of the value chain of manufacturers and distributors, right? Because we have to work together. And so a distributor has multiple manufacturers, right? Multiple product lines. We create partnerships to serve customer needs. And that's an important dynamic. Quick slide here. I'd spend a lot of time on this slide because it gets some of my thinking out, my foundation. A number of very early stage digital startups have come to me. And they just found their way to me through my newsletter or other ways. And I have 2 observations. One is that they tell me it takes, sometimes 4 or 5 years to really get any kind of conversation with both the B2B players, existing companies. I think that's a tragedy, because we should be looking at those companies who very often want to be cooperative with us. They don't want to disrupt us. And we should be, partnering with them, right? Because they bring, I can do anything kind of mindset, technology mindset. But the other thing that where I would criticize them is that so many of them want to be a marketplace. And the reason for that is, I think, their takeout. I think they call it a take in the Silicon Valley. They want to touch the money, right? Right? Because they can take their cut pretty easy for them if they can touch the money through ordering or financing or something else. And that's really true. Those areas can be improved. But back when I used to ask customers to tell me, what are the top 10 things you want from your supplier or distributor or manufacturer, they would never have 10 things, for one thing. They would have 5. And the actual act of placing an order was often not on the list. They took it for granted. Things like delivery, knowledge of my marketplace, willing to commit, working with me on price and cost. Those are the things they valued. Those are the things that are not delivered in a buy box, right? So I think we can do things dramatically different. I think we can do moonshots and moon landings. I think I put should in quotes up at the top, because if we don't, Amazon and others will define our future for us. Okay, that's me. That's my little rant, my little soapbox, picking on Amazon, and they can take it. My definition of B2B is products, making products, creating products, and everything else that happens after the product. I call distribution. That's physical delivery, but it's also all the marketing, sales, support, customer service, product application knowledge, all of that stuff that we deliver. Distributors are pretty much 100% distribution, but manufacturers perform distribution functions too, even when they sell through distributors. Distribution is shared, all right, between the manufacturer and distributor. And I'm talking that value chain right now. I've worked in telecom and life sciences and transportation. We can do those if we want to, but I'm going to stick for this call to manufacturing and distribution value chain, just for consistency. In my book, I want to tell distribution in a human way. So I've started to list, this is under construction, I've started to list sort of what are the human things we do, not marketing and sales, but distributors gather. Traditionally, they gather products. If you think about a platform business, right, there's this new definition which seems to have some currency, which is that platform businesses, like eBay, Amazon, on and on, they don't have to be technology platforms, for one, right? But two, what a platform does is it brings parties together, users together, people who have something, people who want it. They bring humans together or groups together. A marketplace brings buyers and sellers together. There's some platforms out there that have code for programmers. They bring people that have code and need code together, right? So that's a different kind of gathering. And if you line it up with the value chain, which is linear value add, and you can start to think about how platform business models are different than yours, or whether you should incorporate some platform. So I have, we also educate, we persuade, we deliver, we support, we prove our value. And so those are kind of my beginnings of talking about distribution with human terms, in human terms, to see where it takes me. Okay, here's a little, so I kind of zipped through that slide, but mostly foundational. So back in January and February, I talked to 40 or 50 distributors. I ended up telling stories of 10, plus there's a bonus one, so I guess 11, in this publication that we call Distribution Leans In, the stories of resiliency and innovation during the COVID-19 pandemic. I didn't name it. I think it's descriptive, but it doesn't really boil down to an acronym. So it's an e-chapter. If you want to buy it, the price is the bottom. I convinced any of you not to charge $200 for it. So it's 50 bucks. We'll come back to that summary slide. On this, what I'd like to do is share kind of 3 of the 11 stories, right? And so very interesting thing, partially related to timing. When I called up these distributors, most of which I knew, so I've talked to them before, there is that bias. And I said, how are you innovating during the pandemic? Right? There must be a lot of things going on. And this is 8 months in, right? Most of them made a passing reference to how they survived as a business, right? I'm sure that if I talked to them 6 months earlier, it would have been all about their survival, right? But 8 months in, what they wanted to tell me was how they were helping customers in new ways. I thought that was pretty amazing, right? Basically, that's where the title came from. In fact, one distributor used the term, we leaned in. And I had never heard a distributor say that or use that phrase before. I hear it all the time, in my general reading and listening, because it's a phrase that activists use, right? But distributors are cautious by nature. They watch GDP and, so they don't get too ahead on inventory, right? So the idea of leaning in is amazing. Using that term was amazing. And so I looked it up, and it means to act without hesitation. That's a definition of it, right? So let's go back to the start. I'll work from the top down. MHI is a regional distributor of material handling equipment, forklifts, things like that, Southeast. They have a very strong culture of wanting to help their customers. And the way that they kind of model that behavior in their organization is pretty formally in meetings and casual conversations, they ask all of their employees, down to the accountant and the warehouse worker up to the leadership team. They occasionally ask them, or in meetings, they have little roundtable discussions about what are you doing in your personal life to help somebody? They ask that question. And, it might be that somebody's contributing time to Habitat for Humanity, or there was a true story with something like one of the employees, one of their workers, brother's sister's house burned down and they were trying to build it for them. And then the material handling equipment says, well, how can we help? Right? And they offer material handling equipment sometime, or they give the people some time, right, to go off and do these things. They do that because a lot of their workforce is technicians who spend a lot of time at their customer's location, automotive plants and other things, other warehouses, places where they're using forklifts, other material handling equipment. And they want them to say, how can I help? Right. So what they did during the pandemic was they just said, well, we're here to help our customers stay in business, right? And they initially took all the regulations and they translated them for their customers' operations. They weren't really regulations back then. There was that flood of things you have to do for social distancing. Actually designed some of the, how their customers' operations were working, workflow, people standing around, so that they could keep not only their employees safe, but their customers' employees safe, and they can keep everybody working so they could generate wealth and keep living in their lives. That was pretty amazing. SRS is an acquisitive distributor of roofing products. They have made a lot of investments in e-commerce and other digital tools. I think of them as digitally confident. They just did the right thing, and they did the right thing by leveraging digital technologies. So when social distancing became an issue, they already knew a little bit about some of these digital lockers, the kind that Amazon has in your grocery store and around town. There are companies that offer that for more commercial and B2B applications. And they put them, where their customers wanted them, right? On the way to their job site, at their location. They're a little bit smart, they're secure, they report, so they're a little bit digital. They also had kiosks already. Some customers still want to come to their store. They kind of noticed finally that a lot of their customers speak Spanish, but the majority of people, very few people in their stores actually speak Spanish. So they put a click to talk feature on their kiosk. And the very small number of employees who speak Spanish, who are often not in customer facing roles, could talk to their contractor customers. And then they really accelerated something they do that I call it customer workflow. Back to this idea of customers don't care that much, so they expect to be able to place an order in a modern and productive way, right? It's not a differentiator, it's just something they expect. What customers do care about is, they get up in the morning and they're not thinking about how you can be a better distributor or manufacturer. It'd be nice. They're thinking about how they can run their business better. So what SRS does, essentially, they ask, what are your key processes that you run your business around? Why are those your key processes? Are you automating? Can we connect to your automation tools through APIs? So instead of providing a digital way to place an order, which they do, They're now creating digital connection where it matters, which is in the customer's work process, not their shopping journey, right? But in the way that the customers run their business. I think that's potentially one of the most revolutionary things I heard, because if distributors do that, it makes them do 180, right? The old school distributors have a warehouse and stock inventory and take orders. I'm being a little pejorative for simplification. I know they do much more than that. But still, even so, when I ask a distributor to describe their business, they often start by telling me the products and brands they carry, right? I think if I talk to SRS and companies like that, after they've been doing customer workflow things and connecting with APIs for a few years, and I ask them to describe their business, they're not going to talk about the products and brands they carry. They're going to talk about the customer processes where they're embedded. That's going to be their line card for the future. I think that's hugely powerful. Salon Services is a distributor of beauty products, right? So they serve barbershops and salons, right, with conditioner and shampoo and clippers and trimmers and combs and all that stuff. Their culture is intentionally very connected with salons and stylists, very purpose-driven. So we can all remember that during the height of the pandemic, there were lots of stories in the news about stylists, how tough it was for stylists because customers couldn't come to them get their hair done, right? So they did two things. They had an e-commerce capability, and they created a portal that their stylists could do. They could call up their customers at home and say, you can't come see me, but do you want to talk about your hair or your beauty? And those products you buy when you're in the store here, you can buy them. I've got a website for you, just from me to you, that you can buy them on now, with the underpinning being, please don't go to Amazon, start buying them there, right? So it allowed them to keep that kind of product sales relationship they have with their clients. And then what Salon Services did is they went and found some world-class, I think literally a professor at Stanford, some other folks that were world-class on therapy. And they used this amazing thing that, we were all doing called Zoom calls, not to talk about the boring aspects of doing business, but to talk about therapy, right? To talk about how the stylists could manage this when they weren't making any money. And when their clients came back, how they could help the client, manage their own stress. Got choked up there for a minute, right? So, that is about as far away from a distributor stocking inventory in a warehouse and taking orders as you can get. It's oftentimes we're told that artificial intelligence is going to make our life better because it's going to take over the hard tasks, the data tasks, the things that we don't do well as humans. And we'll be happy because we'll be doing things that add more value and that are more human, but nobody ever actually tells us what they are, right? Really. And I think this is an example of that, right? This is a distributor doing AI and e-commerce things who acted with empathy, acted in a very human way during the pandemic to help their customers get through it. So those are three examples. Going back one slide, I ask distributors, are you making a social impact? Sometimes I do that just to see what they say. I did that in these, and they said, no. You've asked me that before, Mark, shut up. I heard that a few times. And then I said, well, you are, because every business that was shut down during the pandemic had a distributor or a manufacturer, a B2B company, trying to keep them in business, right? And I don't think distributor associations and distributors themselves have made enough hay with that, right? I think that's a phrase. All right. So I kind of wrote out these three things, these positionings for B2B companies in general and distributors in particular, right? We're distribution alone is a $6 trillion sector of the US economy. We're here to help, to solve problems. And we are a reservoir of resiliency, right? We help the economy keep going, businesses keep going. Distributors and B2B companies exist to solve problems. Distributors in particular are not intermediaries or middlemen. They hate that term. They're kind of okay with intermediary. I think they're at the center of commerce. And here's an example of that. One distributor told me, this is almost an apocryphal story now, but it's true. They told me that they were doing a Zoom call with one of their customers, and they had an AI vendor on site who was helping this distributor do things, like, the kind of AI, which is, because you bought this, you might want to buy that, or did you know that you bought this last year and you forgot to buy it this year? Those really earth-shaking moonshot applications of AI, I say tongue in cheek. But the AI vendor kind of joined the call. He walked in the room, they put him on the call, and they started talking about the things that the distributor is going to do and how great they would be for the customer. If you forget something, we'll remind you. And the customer said, well, I don't really care about that. I manage my business pretty well. And if you do, you'll embarrass me. But what I want is this. And they listed a bunch of things, which this distributor asked me to keep a little bit quiet, right? But and the customer was really excited that they got to talk about AI and what it could mean for better servicing, right? That's a distributor who doesn't have products in a warehouse and a line card. They have, relationships with AI vendors and others, and they can bring that expertise and those capabilities together to serve customers, right? And redesign their business model as they do it. And that's B2B and distribution at the center of commerce. Okay, 2 quick slides. Just checking my watch. I got 21 minutes or so I think I'm right on track. I like to point out, because people often don't think of it this way, that while things like Six Sigma, continuous improvement is really, really important, and it's a really critical tool for all B2B companies. Six Sigma, continuous improvement is really about getting really, really good at what you already do, right? I think of B2B innovation as doing business differently, right? The second thing I wanted to say is that best practices are also something that we should monitor and we should keep in touch with, right? Because, if you're falling behind, you could be in trouble if you don't have best practices on certain things that are important to you. But best practices also mean that you are forever catching up. So what I challenge distributors and manufacturers to do is to think about this list in the bottom right-hand corner: digital transformation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, process automation, and data sensors or IoT things. And are you implementing those as a best practice? Or are you thinking about them as a way that you can innovate your business model? Which is it? You can do it for both. Be conscious about your decision, right? And I have a definition of what a business model is, since I'm going to say that B2B innovation is about business models. And so my definition of B2B innovation is doing business differently by changing your business model, right? So digital transformation can be about paving cow paths, about applying digital tools to your business processes that you already have without changing them that much. There can be huge benefit of that, right? You probably need to do that as a best practice. CRM, ERP, sales enablement, kind of on and on and on, digital media, social media, digital marketing, sales automation, all those things you need to do from best practice perspective. If we want to do moonshots, we need to think about changing our business model. And so very quickly, I used to throw out my own framework for a business model, and then Osterwalder kind of put this out. And I use this now just because it has everything I had. And in his book, he gives a process for designing a business model or tweaking one, which is basically putting this up on the wall and using sticky notes. It's not overthunk, it's relying on expertise. So I'll just point out a couple of things on this slide. We're in the West. We start reading in the upper left, and what Osterwalder has for better, I don't know why, but when he thinks about the business model, upper left, key partners, right? That goes to my idea that B2B is different than B2C, and that partnerships are so important. key activities, key resources, value propositions, customer relationships, channels, customer segments, cost structure, revenue streams, right? If you're going to apply digital technology to your business and you want to think about your business model and how it can change, this is a very practical tool, right? If you're thinking about globalization or localization and you want to think about your business model, this is a very practical tool. If you're thinking about future of work, future of learning, kind of social stress and generational change and those sort of things, and you want to think about how should I change my business model, this is a great tool. All right, so we're not going to dig into it here, but I just want to put it on the table. It's what I mean by business model, and it's a very valuable tool. So what I'm going to do for the next 15 minutes is I've got too many, so I'm going to skip a couple. I'm going to talk about not best practices catching up, but leaps, getting ahead. The story I tell about this is that I was working a lot in telecom back when the Asian tigers, Korea and others were coming on the scene. They did not build out their telecom systems to be what we had at the time. They aimed for what telecom was heading, and they're essentially ahead of us in some ways, right? And that's another way to think about leaping ahead. So I'm going to talk about data, something called proximity. I might skip some of the other ones. These are all in my newsletter, right? And there's a link there and one at the end if you want to subscribe. There's a 50% discount. But I'm mentioning that here mostly because if I go fast and you want to read about this, you can get at it in the newsletter, right? If you want to dig deeper. So first, I'm going to talk about data sharing. Amazon is sometimes in the news for looking at all of the products on their site and figuring out what's really growing and where the profits are and taking them private label. They can do that because the market is theirs. They have all the data. The data in our market, the real world market, exists at manufacturers and distributors and customers. It's in buckets. It's not integrated, right? In a lot of markets, distributors give or sell, sometimes they get paid for it, their customer sales data, their point of sales data to manufacturers, which manufacturers need. That's why they ask for it, right? And distributors don't want to give it up though, because that's risky. It's telling the manufacturer who their customers are, what they buy, and they risk disintermediation when that happens, right? Well, that's about the opposite of Amazon, right? So if we can find a way, and these are all kind of over the horizon, right? The examples from distribution leans in are happening now, those three and the others. These are things that I've seen some evidence of or moving in this direction, or I've seen people calling for it. But if you know that any of these things are actually happening, please tell me, right? So in retail, there's some discussion about fourth generation retail. The first three generations will feel very familiar to B2B because the first was mom and pops, small businesses, fractionalized or fragmented market. The next was the emergence of Walmart and other big box stores. The third phase of retail was the emergence of platforms, Amazon, eBay, Uber, on, right? And the fourth generation, coming generation, is sort of the algorithmic economy. This is the idea that data will be on systems, but businesses can look into other businesses' data. It's protected, it's proprietary, you can't take it away. There are rules, but as they do that, the entire retail value chain will get to a higher level of supply chain coordination, right? Then that data will also become a source for individual companies or groups of companies, associations, to figure out the next new product or service by watching that data collected from across the entire industry. Very interesting, they talk about virtual brands. So in retail, they have something called DNVB, digitally native virtual brands, which are Warby Parker glasses. They'll ship you the frame, you figure out you want, they add the lens, they ship it to you. They've added stores now, but they were a digitally native virtual brand. This morning, I'm traveling, that's why I'm in a hotel. I was sharing that idea with a buying group of distributors who sell parts, distributors and manufacturers in this buying group, actually. And we kind of, riffed on it a little bit. And I'm I offered an idea that maybe this buying group could create some DNVBs, because DNVBs are often kind of nichey or situational. They come and they go. Not always, but they do. Maybe this buying group could, if they could pool data and they could figure out usage patterns and profitability, maybe they could offer their own DNVBs. You know, on Amazon and hardware, on the pro side and the business side and the consumer side, there are many brands that are DNVB of hardware products. They're big brands now, but they contract everything, right? They're digitally native virtual brands. Proximity. I'm a member of TWIN, the World Innovation Network. Robert Wolcott is one of the founders. He has, as a professor at Kellogg, TWIN is my source for leading edge innovation ideas. I mean, I can have a coffee chat at a conference with DARPA while I'm there, the Defense Research Agency. And so Robert Wolcott has this idea of this term he calls proximity, which is using technology to drive production and provision of products and services closer and closer together. So if you think consumer, you're on Instagram, you're watching one of your influencers, you like his or her or they's shoes, you click, you order, you got them tomorrow, right? That's demand and supply coming together. That works maybe in B2B for convenience buys because they're kind of consumer-like. But if you're doing a project buy or a customization or a solution, you know, demand is not at the point of purchase, right? The products that you're going to buy happen before the order is given to the procurement professional who buys them for you. And it may be multi-party decision-making to figure out the demand of what you're going to buy, right? So I think that proximity is an incredibly valuable concept, right? But if I'm a digital startup and I want to do something other than a marketplace, maybe I should figure out how proximity applies, how I can use technology to move demand closer to fulfillment ever and ever. I think if I design that, it's not going to look like a buy box for some of the for anything but convenience. It's going to look like something else, right? So this is proximity, right? And I think we can use it for those digital startups as well as you know, established B2B companies. I mean, I'm gonna keep going through these at a pretty rapid pace. I've got about 10 minutes left. I can slow down just a tad. But I know that yesterday and today is all about frameworks, right? So let me just kind of reinforce what I'm doing here. I use the frameworks I mentioned and many more: coverage, compensation, customer knowledge, and partnering for many, many years. I think that there is a window of opportunity for B2B companies to own our future and do our moonshots and our moon landings. And to do that, we need not just a new framework for B2B innovation, we need a framework for B2B innovation, especially on the part of B, which is distribution. When I started looking to innovation for NAW, I networked and looked at academic journals. I asked for advice about how to do that because I'm not that good at it. And I just looked up stuff and I found a ton of knowledge. And then I asked people who knew if this is true. You know, most innovation material, I would phrase it as it's either about technology innovation or product innovation, right? There's very little about distribution. There's a little bit about retail, a little bit about services, but it's just dwarfed, right? So B2B is, I think, it's not my area, but we're pretty covered on innovation from a product innovation standpoint. Distribution, I don't know that there is a great framework for innovation for distribution, right? For buy and resell models, for distribution, the bigger distribution, which we all share. I just don't think it's there. So what I'm doing in my newsletter is I am step by step, week by week, taking some future of idea and trying to tie it to, you know, how it might be useful for a B2B company or a B2B innovator. And then I offer some ideas and then I ask questions and then I try to have a dialogue. I'm rolling these up into my book. I'm in search of a framework for B2B innovation, which will become a kind of a, you know, coordinated framework for product and distribution together, B2B innovation overall. So these are not answers. these are questions and ideas, each of these pages. The answers of what it's examples of things being done, that was distribution leans in. So thank you. I had felt like I should say that. Trust. How do you measure loyalty in your business? I've been on a jag recently asking everybody I got on the phone with or meet in person, how do you measure, is loyalty important to you? B2B company, distributor, and manufacturer, how do you measure it? Distributors usually answer as repeat purchases, or maybe I get a little extra margin out of them. And there are more sophisticated ways to do that. But I thought, well, that's a hell of a definition of loyalty, because loyalty is, it's kind of a human value, right? You might have an AI chat box, but it's not loyal to you, even if the customer, even if it is your channel for some portion of your communications with your customers, right? So that got me thinking that, trust. And I found an article, I can't remember the person's name and his article in his books, it's off the top of my head, but it's cited in the newsletter. And he listed, and I don't have them here, but he listed 8 attributes, kind of you're a human center. I think he was a psychologist of that world, how humans build trust. And then he applied them inside a business. So how you can build trust with your employees. What I do in my newsletter is I kind of riff on each of these 8 attributes, and I talk about how we can use them to build trust with our B2B partners across the ecosystem, right? With our customers, our suppliers, with our distributors, with our vendors, right? And I think that I personally think that this will kind of drive my thinking about a framework eventually, that as we do more and more, spend more and more of our lives and more of how we do business in the virtual world, online, enabled by AI, robotic process automation, all of that, we are going to want more, expect more, value more innovation on the human side of business. We shouldn't think of, when you use AI to remind your salespeople that a customer bought this last year and didn't buy it this year, you're kind of transferring a salesperson's role to AI, right? And if that was that particular salesperson's, hook for finding customers and selling stuff, well, they're going to have problems, right? But the challenge, the innovation opportunity, is to think about how we live our lives as humans, how we do business as humans for humans, and put that into our B2B framework, right? Something that on the order of segmenting, targeting, positioning, doing business as a human for humans. I don't know what it looks like, but it's not going to be measuring your customer's loyalty by how much they buy from you, right? That wouldn't work in our personal relationships. I love my partner because they make coffee for me in the morning. I don't think so, right? So that's trust. Physical, 5 minutes to go. I saw this article about, I'll skip the last 2, but I'll do this one very quickly, about Amazon opening department stores. Made me wonder, what should we do? What should B2B companies do with their stores? Most stores, at a distributor, let's say, somebody wants to go and get something instead of having delivered, that's will call. They're on the way to the job site. They want to pick it up. They just want to schmooze, right? The way to innovate physical stores, and there's an article behind this too with lots of suggestions, some great thought leadership, but it's to think about every job position in your customer, from the owner, CEO, the leadership team, the warehouse worker, the engineer, the facility manager, and from a hybrid, think about hybrid, not as do you go to work and work at home, but sometimes they work at your location. That's a 3-way hybrid or tribrid or something like that, right? And so can you create a reason and why a customer might want to do their work at your location, right? The best example of this, I'm going to skip the last 2, probably, just looking at my clock here. I'll do them very quickly, hyper fast. I talked to an ERP vendor the other day that focuses exclusively on the gas and welding industry. And they offer, if you want to find an answer, it's very easy to search the data and find an answer. What they do that's unique, I think all ERP vendors are moving that direction, is they make it possible for your customer to do that. Wow. I could imagine a manufacturer or distributor, who has this ERP platform, inviting customers to your location. And you're there, you've got a big computer set up, So you can just explain how this works. You've got an expert on total cost of ownership, maybe an AI person there, and you train your customers on how to use this tool in the store. That's about as far away as you can get from a B2B physical store as will call, right? So I think we can do a lot with physical things in the physical world as we continue to do things in the virtual world. Refounding is basically using the tech community's founder process, startup process, from building a community and getting financing and venture financing. Can you set back, and if you really want to do it as an analytical exercise, maybe it's a retreat, maybe you do it for real, but you think about, could I start from scratch and design my business as a digital company, right? What physical things would I read back in? And as I'm designing that, which of my customers would I go to for help? Make them part of your community. Your early community members are the ones who love you, even though they don't know what you offer, right? They know you're gonna do something new and they want to help. They want to be part of that. They want to build the brand. Go and test it. Once you have the concept, ask your friends and family if they would give you money for it. Then ask angel financiers, then ask venture financiers. There's different expectations at each tier of financing. Think about how you can drive to hypergrowth, right? I call this refounding, right? Do it as an analytical exercise, maybe over, not at a retreat, maybe over beers in a cafeteria or a bar, beers in a bar on a napkin. And just, pull this out, think about it. Be a great way to think about how you can do your business differently. On the left, value chains. Value chains are run by processes and contracts and expectations and momentum and culture. They lock the current way of doing business in place. They're a control system. We have ecosystems, which might show you the landscape of who's competing and what they're doing, but they don't tell you how to drive change. I'm proposing something in the middle, and that maybe we create it as a thing, so we know how value chains work. We know what ecosystems do. Let's create impact systems, which are a couple of B2B partners, manufacturers and distributors, maybe just manufacturers, maybe with an association, maybe with a vendor, picking out a very specific thing, like how do we use AI? Or how do we improve supply chain logistics, given that there's no worker shortage, there's a worker shortage? Or, we have a big issue on quality in our industry. How do we solve that? Some of these ideas are too big. I think you start small, but you create it as a tool, just like the value chain. Everybody knows how the value chain works. And if we know how impact systems work, it can be a tool for driving change. This is my idea for getting the flying cars. Every business should embrace a purpose. What is my purpose as a business? And a project for improving their industry, right? We should avoid technology tunnel vision. Technology delivers exponential gains. And so almost all innovation starts with technology, right? Thinking back to the moonshot, we didn't talk about the technology. We talked about the astronauts. We talked about the moon. We talked about landing on it. Let's don't always go to technology for innovation. And then embrace tech's openness. I go to industry events, distributors and manufacturers. Everybody goes because they want to find what everybody else is doing and they don't want to share what they're doing. Big problem in B2B. An IP expert told me that if you walked into a Starbucks in the Silicon Valley and you eavesdrop, you might find somebody at a table talking about the next Facebook, right? And if you ask where they're from, they might say Facebook, they might say Amazon, they might be somebody who's a student in an MBA program at Stanford, but they don't all work for the same company. What they do, and this IP expert told me that happens all the time in the Silicon Valley. And when that group gets to something that's real, they paper it. That's what he said. So what do you mean? He said, well, they come to me, this idea, and they ask me to draw up the contract, this ever goes anything, if it becomes a unicorn, that coffee table clutch is going to share in the value. We don't have that in B2B. And because of that, we don't talk about ideas enough. And without ideas, we're not going to have our moonshots. Another Peter Thiel quote is that every one of today's most famous ideas was once unknown and unsuspected. He calls that finding hidden secrets. And there's me, pretty much on time. I didn't leave any time for questions. I didn't see any chats come up though. I was looking.
We have some time though, so if folks would like to either raise their hand, open up their mic, or type in the chat.
Please
It's
do.
it is really fascinating to think about how things have changed. Every time I get a note from Amazon saying, "So, don't you want to do your business buying here?" I think, "Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Really?" No. Can't even imagine. Except if you just need the lowest price on something quick, and but
I think every business leader and innovator should have an Amazon business account. You have to load your EIN. They check out that you're a business, but you ought to have it just to see what they're doing,
yeah,
see what the experience is. I say
yeah.
the same thing. Big whoop.
Yeah. Alibaba is a similar story, and but more challenging perhaps. But
Well, they are different. I mean, Amazon, I think this is still true. If you sell something to a new customer on Amazon, they prohibit or preclude, however they can do it, from you digitally marketing to them. You can go call them physically, but you're not. Alibaba doesn't care. You could use it just for new accounts.
Mhm.
And if you sell something there, take it to your traditional channel. So they are a little bit different. Although Alibaba has huge challenges too, bigger challenges, different challenges. I'm sorry, Lynn, did I speak over you there? I apologize.
No, and the other thing I was thinking about when you did the moonshot is you said that we've thought about the people, and the people were bigger than life and superheroes in some respects, and then just in the last couple of days, William Shatner at 90 got into an aircraft and actually flew to the outer edge of the. No longer do you have to be a superhero, is kind of what I'm thinking, to be.
You could be a 90-year-old formerly great actor and go. And I was really worried about him when I heard he was going.
Yeah.
Was that Bezos's?
Yeah.
Was that his thing?
Yeah.
Because what I read was that William Shatner afterward at the after party started talking about how profound it was for him to have been Captain Kirk and now go to space. And Bezos kind of interrupted him and opened some champagne. And I thought, that's kind of rude.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's only a matter of time, because it's just statistically something's going to go wrong. So who will it be? That will be the famous one that doesn't make it. But in any case, you do look at this and they think it used to be that people were risking their life, and now it feels like, nope, it's just a trip.
Yeah.
So everything changes. Yeah.
It's technologies, I don't know, it's the Palo Alto Research Center had this thing like 20 years ago, studying innovation. They said that, I think they used cars, when cars were new, you had to work on it, right? Now, and I had this, can I talk for a minute here? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
Another story. I talked with this CEO of an HVAC distributor today, and we were talking about how HVAC units are going to be like smartphones, meaning that when you buy them, what are you buying, right? They're run by algorithms. You don't own the algorithms. They put the data in the cloud. They can look at that data. I mean, Apple with their good intention, but they were going to scan your data on your iPhone to look for, sexual predators of children, right? They backed off of that. And there's the whole right to work issue, right? When you open an iPhone, which could send, I guess, an astronaut to the moon, it doesn't come with an instruction manual. It just tells you how to work, how to use it, right? All equipment's going to be like that, right? Yeah. And what does that mean for B2B and our distribution when, when equipment is smart?
Right.
Anyway, sorry.
Smart is still in air quotes kind of smart though, right? It's smart to do something, smart, not necessarily flexible to do anything, but.
There's this, I ran across this, I know everything you say is so on target. We are smart because of our emotions, because we feel a threat. And there's this new idea, an existential threats historically, that makes for human level intelligence. In the AI world, I read the other day that they're putting skins around robots so they can feel pain when they bump into something, because they want to put the existential threat in the AI that drives robots. Isn't that kind of cool?
Or starting to sound like a lot of Arthur C. Clarke novels that are worrisome, but yes, sure, yeah. I don't know, everything is happening so and transforming so quickly, or not so quickly. Like you, I'm still waiting for my flying car.
Yeah.
I Absolutely. I'm actually very concerned that most folks are learning to write code and thinking that is product development.
Yeah,
And very few people are learning how to build things.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's related to the fact that a lot of future work discussions are about office workers. And the
Yeah.
people who are designing solutions for office workers work in offices, right? I think that the people that live in the Silicon Valley should go be a plumber for a few months. Right?
Yeah, so my Tesla has some noises in it, which are much more prominent because there's no engine noise to hide it. And I am afraid to try to figure it out, even though I know I could fix my other car,
Yeah,
my internal combustion car. I would take it apart and put it back together. This one, I have no idea whether I can take a panel off or not. I don't know what's in there. There's no diagrams. When I was younger, I had the books that were big and wide, and every car I had an entire manual that I could,
yeah.
every part was in it and how to put it back together. And you don't have that with any of these things today.
Do you have a right of repair issue like smartphones? You know, there's been some legal action to give consumers the right to repair their smartphones. Does Tesla
Yeah,
have it
well,
for its cars?
not only do you not have a right to repair in Tesla, they have a right to change what you bought.
Yeah,
So you bought it, and every time they decide to download software to it, you have something new.
it's like, but
Something,
wait a moment, I like that, right?
something new that
That
might
was
not be
feature.
working, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
That I need to take back and put back in differently. And that part really disturbs me because I like contracts. And, you know, when I buy something, I have a contract, I know what I bought. But if you give me a contract on something that's ever changing, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can think now about this for B2B because Tesla and smartphones are here, right? And it's going to come to equipment for sure, right? It's absolutely going to come to it, and other parts of B2B too. This is
So
great, Lynn. Are there any questions? I'm not looking at this
we
one.
could talk forever because I have probably the same idea. But Lori reminds everybody that you have a newsletter and there's a discount apparently if we go to this little link here.
Link.
Put in the chat window. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
You'll also want that. And if nobody else wants to chat, and if you want to hang around for a little bit, Mark, yesterday at the end of the day, we had another, I don't know, 20 minutes or so of just whoever wanted to hang out was chatting.
Okay.
And so we're going to do a couple of things at the end of the day here. We're going to do some polls. We're going to ask everybody who's here, who is all staying because they know there is a raffle. So I'm encouraging people to stay through the end of the day